America or Second Egypt, ancient artifacts of Joseph, son of Jacob, who saved Israel, Grand Canyon artifacts, part 3. And we continue from where we left off. F also meant family in the Armenian Semitic language of Armen that King Zaphna spoke and wrote. He could also speak the Egyptian language, but he only wrote in the Semitic Armenian language of Shem. Then the ITIT is where some ancient copper mines were located in Ohio. Then on the left side of the map is ITII, where the diamond mines in Arkansas are located. On the top left is X, the location of the Egyptian tunnel city in Illinois. The O's are where the Egyptian dirt pyramids were located here at the time, here in America, that is, at the time of the artifact from Burroughs Cave. There were more later artifacts that had more of the latter Egyptian periods near the river. Burroughs Cave was a burial tomb that had 12 crypts in the cave. There were also 5 statues in the cave, but more burial crypts were found when the block tunnels were reopened. There are now many ancient Egyptian artifacts from the Skillet Fork Cavern complex that still are not on public display at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., even though they were found by Smithsonian archaeologists. These gold artifacts were in one of the crypts for one of the kings from the Egyptian tunnel tomb in southern Illinois. His name and family genealogy is on the gold coffin artifacts. The arrow and 2 symbols for the second land of Egypt is at the top of the artifact on the right. The Egyptian gold coin for his empire is on the center right, and 2 diamonds, the Semitic symbol for a sun on the right hand, is the bottom right artifact in this picture. This artifact, recovered from Burroughs Cave, Illinois, was identified as being information for King Solomon. The bottom right is 7K, which means 7th Empire location for King Solomon, which he did record at other places in Ophir, North America. The title pyramid on the artifact is the legal ring seal stamp that King Solomon used. Then an arrow points to the large Star of David. The large Star of David was King Solomon's symbol for Judea. This star symbol has been found on artifacts in other places where King Solomon ruled Ophir from. And to the left of the arrow under the Star of David is O with an I. In the center of the O was King Solomon's symbol for the king of Ophir when he was the king of Ophir. Then under the O is a F that is turned backwards with 3 lines instead of 2 lines, with the word he in one language and window in the other language. This was the Semitic symbol name for King Solomon. Gold artifacts recovered from Burroughs Cave identified as being of Queen Namah, who was King Solomon's first wife. Queen Namah is wearing a dress, standing at the door of the temple, holding a staff of the Lord. You'll see in this site I'll leave for you. All of Queen Namah and King Solomon's writings were written in the first original Aramaic Semitic language, named the Armen language. The Armenian language can easily be the Armenian. The first writings in the language that have been preserved in the Atlantis books are now over 4,120,147 years old, which were the solar sundial calendar dates. These first dates for the Armen language were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls information, 1946, in the Karam caves in Palestine. The Armenian language is the oldest written language of the world. King Solomon was educated at the Temple of Ammon in Saqqara, Egypt. Saqqara, Egypt was also Ophir at that time, and was where the king gave Solomon his daughter Namah after Solomon prepared a meal that pleased the Canaanite king of Egypt. On the left bottom of that artifact, the F that meant family in the Armenian language. Above the F is a Q, which is the first letter of the word QN, which is pronounced as queen. Above Q is the ring seal Queen Naman, used for the legal documents, and her ring seal is N, which was the last letter for QN, which word means queen. The above box of that is the line for the box that was Semitic symbol for the firstborn daughter. And going down the article, we found artifacts removed from Burroughs Cave again identified as Hittite general because he was wearing a Hittite-style helmet that Hittite generals wore. On top of that is a diamond, which meant wealth. After the Hittite and Assyrian peace treaty was signed in Egypt in 1259 BC, any king was permitted to hire Hittite generals and their army east of the Jordan River. Both King David and King Solomon had Hittite generals and armies. Artifacts from Burrow Caves. Vas Alexandre ou Pleo wrote in the artifacts. Alexander of Ptolemy III was the son of King Philadelphus Ptolemy II and his second wife Cleopatra. King Philadelphus Ptolemy was King Philip in the Bible. In 331 BC, Alexander Ptolemy III not only spent 9 months in Egypt, and during that time conquered the country, had himself named King Alexander of Egypt and started the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, and then he left Egypt. He knew about Atlantis from the Atlantis books. He wrote that he wanted to see where his earliest known ancestor Shem had lived, which was at the Oasis of Eden in Atlantis. The Oasis of Eden is in Arizona, and Atlantis is now North America, which did not sink into the ocean as the Romans wrote. He had the information for King Zaphna, and knew King Zaphna of Egypt was one of his ancestors as well. We're talking about Joseph, son of Jacob of the 12 tribes of Israel. One of Alexander's favorite books was named the Iliad, which was wrote about King Achilles, the ancestor of his mother Cleopatra. He was known to use this book often during his campaigns for information about the battles won by King Achilles. When Philadelphus II married Cleopatra in 355 BC, his first wife, Olympias, was outraged and took her daughter, Thessaloniki, to Epirus, where she did not return until after King Philip, the father of Alexander the Great, was killed in a war with the Greeks. Evidence was found here in Burrow Caves in Illinois speaking for itself. Difficult as it may be for us to accept, Alexander the Great did not die in Babylon as written. The cave in Illinois is undoubtedly the lost tomb of Alexander the Great, and for many of his lineal descendants, Alexander Ptolemy III was the Oasis of Eden in Arizona, where he developed a fever that lasted 12 days before he died. Some of his last words were recorded: "I am dying from the treatment of too many physicians. I would rather excel others in the knowledge of what is excellent than in the extent of my powers and dominion. In faith and hope the world will disagree, but all mankind's concern is charity. Remember, upon the conduct of each depends the fate of all. There is nothing impossible to him who will try. A tomb now suffices he for whom the whole world was not sufficient." These last words that Alexander Ptolemy III spoke here at the Second Land of Egypt were recorded in writing by Ptolemy Soter II, who was with Alexander when he died here in the United States. Several artifacts for ships: Burroughs Cave, Cleopatra VII, Juba Heli II, Prince Alexander Elios, had around 180 ships home-based here in the United States at one time. Ships were smaller than the Roman ships. These ships were slender, built ships that were faster than the large Roman ships, and the sails were made out of animal skin so that not any wind would pass through the sails. Gold artifacts recovered from Burroughs Caves, identified as the artifact for Queen Cleopatra Ptolemy Philopator, and Burroughs Cave in Illinois is the lost tomb of Queen Cleopatra Ptolemy. She did not commit suicide in Alexandria, Egypt. The Romans knew very little about her because she was very secretive for her own safety. Almost everything that the Romans recorded about her was incorrect. She was born 69 BC and died 32 AD, as recorded by all members of her family. Cleopatra VII was the child of Cleopa Selene Heli of Judah and King Ptolemy the 12th Auletes of Egypt. Cleopa Selene Heli was the daughter of Heli in the Bible. His Ptolemy Greek name was Alexander Helios II, who was the king of Judah until he was killed in Judea by the Romans in 36 BC. Cleopa Selene Heli had been sent to Alexandria, Egypt to be educated and meet Ptolemy XII Auletes in Egypt. The gold artifact in her jewelry was in her burial crypt in Burroughs Cave, Illinois. This cave is the location of her lost tomb. Cleopatra Ptolemy the seventh originally ruled jointly with her father as a teenage girl with the rest of her siblings, Ptolemy XII Auletes, and later with her sisters Arsinoe IV and her brothers Ptolemy XIII and Ptolemy XIV, and first co-ruler with them at Edfu in Egypt. She was married as her Egyptian Ptolemaic custom to her brother at birth, who were Ptolemy XIII and Ptolemy XIV, but these were only legal marriages to consolidate power and wealth, and there were no children. The entire time that she was in Egypt, she was a young girl at Edfu, Egypt. In 58 BC, Ptolemy XII Auletes and Cleopatra VII and Arsinoe IV fled to Rome in search of political and military aid against Cleopatra VI Tryphaena, who had become far too powerful. After Tryphaena's death in 57 BC, she at age 20 became the co-ruler of Egypt from Rome. Due to her father's absence in Egypt and with him and Cleopatra VII in Rome, she had no worry about being overthrown or overpowered and executed. She did not even return to Egypt, and her brothers Ptolemy XIII and XIV ruled Egypt for her in Alexandria, Egypt until 15 BC. When Julius Caesar was killed in 44 BC, both Cleopatra VII and Mark Antony left Rome for their safety. After this date, the Romans did not even learn where they were. Not only very few historians have learned this recorded information because almost everything that the Romans wrote about her was incorrect. Burroughs Cave was the lost tomb of Queen Cleopatra Ptolemy Cleopatra VII. More artifacts information for her were found in her burial crypt. There are a number of incorrect stories about Cleopatra that were written by the Romans that did not even know about the second land of Egypt and knew very little about her. There are only 3 correctly identified artifacts for her, and there are numerous busts in museums that are for the daughter Cleopatra Selene II that are incorrectly identified artifacts that are being displayed as Cleopatra VII, which is no less than shameful to her as well. 150 years after Mark Antony's army and her army defected to Octavian in Alexandria, Egypt, Florus, a Roman, wrote a book named Epitome de Livio Bellorum Omnium Norum DCC, which is primarily a fictitious book, and he became wealthy because of his book. The book was written in a bombastic, boasting style about the greatness of the first Roman rulers. He wrote that Cleopatra committed suicide August 12, 30 BC by letting an asp snake bite her on her breasts at Alexandria, Egypt, but that was totally incorrect and impossible because Queen Cleopatra VII was not even in Egypt in 30 BC. She was in Rome, and her daughter Cleopatra Selene II, her grandson Ptolemy's I, and King Juba Heli II recorded in their books that Cleopatra died a natural death in 16 AD instead of 32 BC at the age of 85 in the land of the Second Egypt in America instead of 32 BC, as Florus wrote in his book. But modern encyclopedias are still publishing incorrect information that Florus wrote for Queen Cleopatra VII as being her correct history, that she died by snake bite. Artifacts from Burroughs Cave identified as artifact for Ptolemy Cleopatra Philomenor Caesar XV, June 23rd, 47 BC to July 23rd AD, was the son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra VII. Romans knew very little about him because in 44 BC, he left Rome with Mark Antony and Cleopatra VII at age 3, and the Romans did not even know what he looked like when he grew up into a man. And they were, of course, they knew he existed. They were looking for him to kill him, but they couldn't find him. And thereafter, Romans did not even learn where he was. Almost everything that the Romans wrote about him had been proven to be incorrect. Ptolemy Caesar was born in 47 BC in Rome. His father was Julius Caesar. He was nicknamed Caesarion, which means Little Caesar. 150 years after Mark Antony's smaller army defeated Octavian in Alexandria, Flores wrote a book. And as we said, information was totally correct. Several of Prince Alexander Ilias III and Cleopatra Selene II coins were found in Burroughs Cave in both of their burial crypts. December 25th, 40 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to twins, fathered by Mark Antony, who were named Alexander Ilias III and Cleopatra Selene, that were born in the second land of Egypt in America. They had minted silver coins together as co-rulers of Egypt and the other lands of the Ptolemy Empire. And this is the example here that you see. King Juba Heli II identified artifacts in Burroughs Cave. There are a lot of recorded history for King Juba II, 52 BC to 23 AD. He married Cleopatra Selene II, who was the twin sister of Prince Alexander Ilias. He was the Prince of Mauritania when he married Cleopatra Selene II. He met her at the boarding school Alexandria, Egypt, where he was educated, wrote 52 books. Cleopatra Selene II was the daughter of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Juba was a name that had passed from grandfather to grandson for numerous generations. King Juba Heli II recorded numerous trips transporting grains and metals from America to Egypt, Rome, to Greece, India, Judea, and the land of Erin, now Norway and Great Britain. His boat was being loaded with olive oil and wine and wool at Port Joppa in Judea shortly after Christ was crucified. He recorded that he hid Philip, Luke, and Cleopa Selene Heli on his boat, brought them to safety in America. Philip was his brother-in-law. Luke was his brother of his sister-in-law Lucy Helios. And Cleopa Selene Heli was the grandmother of his wife Cleopatra Selene II. Not either the Jews or Romans knew where the second land of Egypt was located or that it even existed. Artifacts from Burroughs Cave identified Ptolemy Philadelphus Heli or Ilias, the sun symbol, top of the artifact. September 36 BC, Cleopatra had a son that was named Ptolemy Philadelphus, fathered by Mark Antony, who was born in the second land of Egypt, as we said. And if you look at the Cahokia, Cairo, Illinois mound, it's actually a pyramid. Etowah pyramids in Georgia, just to name a few, look very similar. Monk's Temple Pyramid, located in the Cahokia Mound City in Cahokia Mound State Park, near Collinsville, South Illinois. It is over 108 feet high and has 16-acre base. Not any pyramid in Egypt has such a large base. It was built with hard-packed clay blocks, but most of the clay brick blocks have turned back into dirt. Construction began in the inner city around 10,000 BC and continued in separate stages until the city reached a population of about 15,000 around 400 BC. Then construction began for the outer area until the total population reached about around 40,000 by 1500 AD, and then the construction stopped. At the top of Monk's Temple Pyramid is evidenced a large wooden building 105 feet long and 48 feet wide that was the temple and home of the city's rulers, the great kings. There is an underground room 23 feet deep under the surface of the pyramid, located 200 feet south of the north rim of the pyramid. The pyramid city was over 6 square miles in size and had 120 more smaller pyramids. On top of part of the outer smaller pyramids were schools and temples where school tablets, religious artifacts have been found. The children were well educated. I'll leave a link below for you for part 4, continuing this series.